freaking love it. I think it's an equalizer for the regular retail investor like us to equal and combat the institutional investor like, let's say, BlackRock, Vanguard, and all the above. And the big topic right now is XRP. Where will XRP go? You know, I have any XRP fans out there in the crowd, in the chat? Raise your hand. Did you know that if you would have invested just $1,000 in XRP back in, I think it's 2017, potentially that would have been worth roughly about $200,000 to $300,000 right now. But that's always hindsight. Hell, in 2010, had you invested in Bitcoin, which Bitcoin, depending on what date and what month you looked at it, in 2010, it was anywhere from 6 cents to 50 cents per token. Talk about some real hindsight. So we're going to see where we're at here.
So today I want to help break down some of the rumors and developments around XRP, which I think are super fascinating.
I actually believe this technology is going to be very important.
Ripple's a company of really professional people working really hard on this. That's why we chose XRP. We believe in XRP. We're not making a price prediction, but we do believe it's a coin that will have the most utility out there.
Canadian XRP ETFs, for example, which launched just a few weeks ago, have already seen roughly $280 million in trading volume. And BlackRock, which is the world's biggest asset manager with over $10 trillion under management, is rumored to be exploring XRP's blockchain technology to tokenize their global assets. But there's also rumors of Bank of America.
Okay, tokenizing of assets. That's an interesting statement because, you know, when I talked about equalizing the institutional investors with the retail investors like you and I, let's just put it this way. Could you afford a Mona Lisa? If you say, hey, look, man, I'm going to go out and buy me I'm going to buy the Mona Lisa. Could you afford it? I'm going to buy a Starry Night, Pablo Picasso. I'm going to, I'm going to buy whatever, some priceless artifact, right? I'm going to buy it. 9 times out of 10, most people, most average folks like you and I cannot afford that. But people like BlackRock see the potential in crypto, meaning that more people could afford a fractional share of that. So if they tokenized it and sold it off in fractional shares, how much more money could they generate? It's a genius idea.
Potentially partnering with Ripple, and there's also breakthroughs like the Genius Act, which are clearing the way for Ripple's stablecoin, Real USD. Now, before I get into it, I like to start these videos by showing you my portfolio so you can judge for yourself exactly how biased I may or may not be. So, full transparency, XRP represents a very small percentage of my portfolio. It's about 0.1%. So I'm definitely not all in, but my XRP holdings have grown by over 10x from my initial investment, and even if just some of the predictions were to come true from this video, it could represent a much bigger part of my portfolio in the future. Now, this is just a reminder that as you're watching this video, please remember that this will be very speculative, it'll be exciting, and as always, please don't treat this as financial advice because it's not. So let me get into exactly why people are dreaming of these insane price predictions again, and why there might actually be something real behind all the hype. So with that said, let's get into it. Hi, my name is Andre Jick. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for XRP. Now, in the middle of June this year, Canada became the first major market to greenlight spot XRP ETFs with Purpose Investments, 3iQ, and Evolve. They all launched their funds on the same day. And in just the first week, those 3 ETFs traded about 280 million Canadian dollars worth of XRP. What's even more interesting, though, is that these ETFs outpaced the initial volumes that were seen in a lot of the early Bitcoin and Ethereum funds in Canada, which means that demand for XRP is really high right now. Now, at the same time, though, here in the US, there were 11 separate filings for spot XRP ETFs They are now pending with the SEC, and analysts from Bloomberg are now assigning a better than 80% chance that at least one of these US XRP ETFs will be approved by the end of the year. Now, if this...
Not to stop him, because he's very knowledgeable about a lot of the crypto scene. But, you know, I've been dabbling in crypto for a while myself, but I got to tell you, somebody there? But I got to tell you, the ETFs, that's the way to go. I would tell anyone, if you're investing in an ETF, if you're investing anyway, anything, I think diversification is obviously critical, right? You want to diversify where you put your money, not just savings, not just 401ks, not just, gold, silver, stuff like that. That's cool. But ETFs, because they pay dividends, and they usually pay dividends every month or every quarter, but typically every month, especially yield max dividends, or excuse me, yield max ETFs, one of my favorites. Just want to put that out there. XRP, this is going to be huge.
Were to happen, though, we could see the same pattern that happened in Canada, that the XRP ETFs could see more money flowing into them than both Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs. But next up, let's talk about regulation and why it actually matters for XRP's real-world use cases. Because on July 18th, Congress passed and the president signed the Genius Act, which is the first ever federal framework for dollar-backed stablecoins. Now that this law is in effect, it's going to require every stablecoin to be 100% backed by liquid assets, have monthly reserve audits to make sure that everything's legit, and stablecoins will have to meet strict consumer protection standards. Now, for Ripple's XRP, this is huge because it clears the way for their own stablecoin, Real USD, to go live on the XRP ledger without constant uncertainty. Now, once Real USD is in circulation, it can fuel what's called ODL, or the on-demand liquidity, which is Ripple's product that uses XRP as a bridge currency to settle cross-border payments instantly. Now, that's a lot of complicated words, but imagine banks or payment providers on-ramping dollars into Real USD at one end, moving the value on the ledger in seconds, then off-ramping back to dollars on the other side, all without the delays and fees of traditional banking. And because Real USD...
Basically, he's talking about, how do we normally send money like that? How does anyone normally send large amounts of money right now? How do they do it? They send it through Western Union, wires transfers, which are slow and cumbersome and also extremely expensive, right? Imagine being able to do it for a fraction of the cost in the blink of an eye. That's what XRP is capable of. And that is where it bridges the banking system with crypto, which is a beautiful match made in heaven.
USD sits on the ISO 222 standard, the XRP ledger has sub 1 second finality, 1,500 transactions per second capacity, and very, very small fees, which means it could process billions and billions in daily volume at a tiny fraction of today's costs. So while these ETFs are making all the headlines, I think the behind-the-scenes rail upgrades are really what turns speculation into real adoption. But now that the Genius Act has been approved, there's something really interesting that's happening in the banking and credit world. Credit card companies and payment networks will have to start partnering with crypto companies.
Yes.
To put this scale into perspective of just how big that would be, global cross-border payments crossed around $190 trillion in 2023. And there's estimates that it would reach $290 trillion by 2030. Now, stablecoin market caps are also estimated to reach $500 billion to $1 trillion in the next few years. And even capturing just a fraction of that market would represent a huge opportunity. And companies like Visa have already figured this out. They've already announced plans to integrate digital payments on its networks. And there's rumors that Bank of America is exploring a partnership with Ripple to leverage on-demand liquidity and real USD.
Oh,
Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan says the bank would consider a stablecoin if U.S. regulations allow it. Speaking at the Economic Club of Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, Moynihan said it's pretty clear dollar-backed stablecoins will garner mass adoption. He also said that if the Trump administration and lawmakers on Capitol Hill pass stablecoin legislation, Bank of America would.
what XRP looks like to me with this mass adoption, and Bitcoin is the OG. It is the bridge that allow people to open their eyes. XRP could be bigger than Bitcoin. I want you to think about that. When I talked about 2010, when XRP was in this 6 to the 30 cent range, it's a little bit, XRP is a little bit more than that now. It's like $3 and some change, but we're still in the infancy stage of XRP and what it's capable of. And when it explodes, and you know this with crypto, when crypto explodes, it explodes fast. And you just got to hold on, embrace, and just enjoy the ride. But you need to get in when you can get in. This is not financial advice, by the way. I'm just saying, if we're going to talk crypto, we just talk crypto. So that's all I'm saying. XRP is the next one up.
Would go into the business of stablecoins.
Now, to be very clear, this is still a rumor, but if it were to happen, that would be huge. Now, at the same time though, Ripple has applied for a US national bank charter with the OCC. They're applying for a bank license. And if it's given, it could settle deposits directly with the Federal Reserve, bypassing traditional banks completely. So when you combine all of this though, a bank license and the potential partnership with other banks, it could really push XRP and its ledger in the center of the US financial plumbing system. And that would dramatically increase the chances that institutions would adopt the ledger for the next part that I want to show you,
They don't want to miss
which is
out on that
tokenization.
thriller.
Now, tokenization is going to change the world and how we invest.
I believe the next generation for markets, the next generation for securities will be tokenization of security.
For those of you who don't know who this man is, this is the CEO of BlackRock, the largest investment firm in the world. They have their hands in everything business, period.
The tokenization of financial assets could reach multiple trillions by 2030. But here's what it means. Tokenization
If you don't know who
is
BlackRock
the
is,
process of
Google
taking
it.
something of value, like the stock of a company, a piece of real estate, or even a piece of a Pokemon card, and turning it into a digital token on a blockchain. So imagine owning a fraction of a beach house that you think will go up in value. Instead of buying the whole house, which most of us can't afford to do, each token will represent a tiny slice of that underlying asset.
Do you realize the implications of that? That is next level.
And because it lives on the blockchain, these tokens can be traded instantly, anywhere in the world, 24/7, without the usual
No
layers
middleman.
of brokers, custodians, and clearinghouses that slow everything down and add cost to traditional transactions. Now, I can't overestimate just how big this will be in the future. And believe it or not, Robinhood is actually doing this right now. They are tokenizing the US stock market as a way to allow the European markets to buy US stocks.
What we announced last Monday in the south of France are several products for the EU stock tokens, which give exposure to public listed equities. We have over 200, and those are available 24/5, finally giving our European customers exposure to US stocks.
It's kind of like a backdoor access to US markets without needing regulatory legal approval. Now, the rumor, though, is that BlackRock, which again is the world's biggest asset manager, is quietly looking at blockchain platforms to be their backbone for issuing tokenized versions of not just stocks, but everything.
Everything.
From treasuries to
Yes.
ETFs to fractional real estate shares.
Yes.
So if BlackRock or if any other blue chip asset manager were to choose the XRP ledger to create and settle these tokenized assets, it would instantly validate Ripple's technology. Of course, this is still a very big rumor, very speculative, and until we see a joint press release or a regulatory filing, I would classify this in the high risk, high reward category. But that's partially why the price of XRP is going up. Markets are trying to predict the future, and they do that by pricing in at least a part of the what if scenario. But now let's get a little hypothetical and translate what all of this could mean for XRP's price using today's actual numbers. Keep in mind, all of this is going to be super speculative. But first, did you know that you can actually earn XRP without ever buying it? That's what I've been doing with the Bitcoin credit card by Gemini, which is today's sponsor and actually a credit card I've been using for a while now. So all opinions are my own and we're not influenced by Gemini. I use this like any other regular credit card for gas and groceries, and I earn Bitcoin every time I use it. It has no annual fee. You can see the rates and fees in the description down below for more info.
For those of you who don't know what Gemini is an exchange. Guess who created that exchange? Are you familiar with the Winklevi? The Winklevoss brothers, the original creators of Facebook. Yes, Gemini is their company. They invested all that Facebook money into Bitcoin when Bitcoin wasn't worth hardly anything. And now who's got the last laugh? Now they got one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world, and they are doing just fine. They made a bet on themselves, and they bet right.
But this thing gives you up to 4% back in over 50 cryptocurrencies instantly. You can choose which one you want. Personally, I have it set to Bitcoin, but you can also choose XRP if you like. But that's 4% on gas, transit, and rideshare, 3% on dining, 2% on groceries, and 1% for everything else. It's also a MasterCard World Elite, so I've used it internationally with no issues, and I like knowing that every time I swipe, it adds to my stack, which is something I plan to hold for in the long term. And here's the magic. You're investing as you spend. In fact, according to Gemini, cardholders who earned and held their Bitcoin for 1 year saw an average appreciation of 176%. Those are not your typical credit card points. So if you're interested, click the link in the description or go to gemini.com/Andre and get $200 in Bitcoin when you spend $3,000 in your first 90 days. Thank you, Gemini, for sponsoring this segment of the video. And now let's get back to it. As of right now, XRP's market cap sits at about $188 billion with roughly 59.2 billion tokens in circulation. Now, in a conservative scenario, let's assume that BlackRock does a test pilot and they tokenize 5% of their AUM or assets under management, which remember, they're managing roughly $11.6 trillion.
Right.
They won't tokenize all of it at once.
No,
that's not realistic, but 5%, that's doable.
It's realistic.
The question is, what would they back that 5% or $580 billion
They have to back
worth
it with XRP.
It could be US treasuries, it could be some form of dollars, but it could be a lot of things. But let's imagine BlackRock takes a conservative approach and they take 20% of that 5%, which is $116 billion. So it will need $116 billion worth of XRP on chain. Which, dividing 116 billion by the 59.2 billion XRP outstanding equals about $1.96 of incremental demand per token. Add that to today's $3.19, and you're looking at roughly $5.15 per XRP. But let's take it a step forward. The base case, not conservative, but maybe something more realistic. What if BlackRock backs 50% of that pilot program in XRP? That's $290 billion. And the math comes out to about $4.90 extra per coin. Stacking that on top of today's price would put it at roughly $8.09. But now let's imagine a dream case scenario. Let's say the rumors are true and they put 100% of that $580 billion pilot program and they fill it with XRP demand. That would imply an additional $9.80 per token. Layer that on top of today's $3.19 and you land somewhere around $13 per coin. Now keep in mind, this is just institutional tokenization demand, which alone pushes it between $5 to $13. But when you then factor in continued ETF inflows from Canada, the potential approval of US ETFs, growing real USD powered ODL volume under the Genius Act, and on-chain accumulation by whales and other investors, the potential of other bank partnerships, and even getting their own banking license, and you can see that the path could be much, much higher.
20,
but having said
30,
all that, this
40,
is where I want to balance out the rest of this video's excitement with bringing it back to reality. Because a lot of times in crypto, we're effectively placing a bet that everything from here on out will play out exactly as we hope it will. And in crypto, that rarely ever happens, and there are some risks that you should be aware of. And the first risk is this video and listening to price predictions. I've seen price predictions as high as $2,000 by 2026, which I think is just super unrealistic.
That's unrealistic.
That would mean the market cap would exceed $100 trillion, which would make it about as big as the stock market of the entire world. Now,
But
I know
that's
that market
not
caps are not as
far-fetched.
directly applicable to settlement layers and network effects, but there is still some logic there. So please don't listen to price predictions and always consider the risks. Like another major risk, for example, is that the XRP ledger might never become the go-to platform for tokenization on the scale that we'd like it to. Take Robinhood, for example. They are using 2 blockchains for their tokenized assets, Arbitrum and their own layer 2 blockchain that is based on Ethereum. Now that's Robinhood. They are not crypto experts. It might have
True.
even made more sense for
They're
them to
actually really behind
partner
the curve.
with the real experts, but they still
they're
opted to
taking-
build their own system
Exactly.
instead of outsourcing to a third party
Smart.
to trust. Now then ask yourself this question.
Keep that money in-house.
Why would a giant like BlackRock partner with anyone when it could just spin up its own ledger and keep every layer under its own control? Institutions prefer full ownership of their rails
that.
rather than using a third party.
True that.
So that BlackRock pilot program we talked about could end up on another custom blockchain of their own instead of the XRPL. So yes, all of this is possible, but as of right now, I think it's highly improbable. But here's another major risk to consider. Put yourself in the shoes of a central bank or a country. Let's say you want to move $1 billion of a tokenized commodity to another country.
Here you go.
Whatever it is, whether it's
Right.
wheat, oil, or gold, right?
Right.
Why on earth would you want to use any cryptocurrency of any kind when they swing 10% in a day? If you're sending $1 billion to the United States, they better receive $1 billion and not a penny less.
Correct.
And that's exactly why stablecoins will dominate that space.
Right.
And Ripple's real USD stablecoin or another government issued one will do those transfers instead of any cryptocurrency.
Right.
Now that might still be good for Ripple the company, but time will tell if it's any good for XRP the cryptocurrency and therefore XRP investors. There's a very big difference between the two. And even though there's no denying that Ripple has built a very valuable.
Here's why I think what he's saying makes sense. But it's so difficult to just immediately invent a coin that's just going to dominate, the sector. Well, instead of just integrating what's already dominant and integrating it into what you do. See, the smart people need to be around Donald Trump and actually tell him this instead of just thinking, oh, we can just make it up as we go. We can just invent it. The brightest minds already have done this. They've already made these types of coins that handle these major issues. So integrate that in what you do. That would make more sense to me instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. Be smart about it. XRP is American. It is. Integrate that into American society, buddy. And then you can really dominate. You can dominate.
rail
That's
system.
my opinion.
How it's going to translate to the cryptocurrency has yet to be proven. So anytime you hear predictions of $100 or $1,000, yes, it's possible. But in order to get there, we need a lot of assumptions to come true. And then on top of those assumptions, we need to layer another 10. In contrast to Bitcoin, for example, now that it's over $100,000, that's only about 8 to 10x away from $1 million, which is still an amazing return. But it's not the same moneymaker back when it was just $1,000.
Right.
There was a much bigger opportunity back then
Right.
because there were more assumptions that had not come true just yet. But now that there are less of them on Bitcoin, the reward has been compressed. Don't get me
Right.
wrong though, even Bitcoin has its mythical narratives about how it's gonna demonetize global assets and eventually become the base reserve currency of the future when AI is gonna take over the world and it'll be 13 million a coin by 2040. Now that's cool if it's gonna happen, but there's a lot more assumptions that need to
13
come
million.
true first, which is why it's nowhere near where people think it will be
2045.
right now.
Lord
That's why,
have
as much as I believe and invest in this stuff, even Bitcoin for me is no more than 20 to 30% of my net worth. It's something, but it's not everything. because I try not to treat investing
Diversify.
like I'm rooting for a sports team. But
Right.
here's arguably the most important takeaway, and it's a lesson that I learned from making a very big mistake. Keep in mind, this is like 2017, Andre, but I once put a big part of my savings into a cryptocurrency I thought would 1000x, and it never did, because of course it didn't. So I lost a huge chunk of money chasing that home run.
Right.
But looking back at it though, I realize now that I only needed to invest just enough that if the story came true, I could turn my savings into $1 million.
Right.
Life-changing money,
Correct.
but not life-ruining if it failed.
That's
Because
the
think
difference.
about it, missing out on the profits from $1 million to $5 million or from $5 million to $10 million, it's not a huge lifestyle upgrade. But the downside of losing my entire savings
It's a
could be
major
catastrophic.
catastrophic
That asymmetry
event.
is the key. It's so counterintuitive, but big upsides don't require risking everything.
That's right.
In fact, they require
Be
risking
smart.
less. Now, I'm not saying don't chase your dreams. Crypto is where a lot of money can obviously be made.
Absolutely.
Just don't mortgage your house to do it or
Don't be
use up all your
stupid.
savings. And if you come across a video with 1 million views predicting something and it's exciting, please do your own research first, make small, smart bets, diversify, and only risk what you can afford to lose.
Amen.
So smash that like button if this made sense to you. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to see you back here next week. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
And that's what I say. That's what I say. Only invest what you're willing to lose. Do not be stupid. Be smart. And I hope you enjoyed our little segment today called XRP Crypto Talk. I'm going to do more of these because I freaking love crypto. That is truly an equalizer in the world of finance for the institutional and the retail, which we are retail. You could literally change your life. So I'm not going to give you like because I can't. I'm not a genius. I just listen to the people that are geniuses and they say, hey, listen, you should look at this. You should look at this. You should look at this. We're going to talk more about those things in the near future here. So I appreciate you guys tuning in, chat. Follow, like, subscribe to my man here. He's got great content, not just on crypto, but just about everything finance wise. And like and subscribe to me, my channel, Big J Reacts. I also have another channel. I'm not even going to talk about that. Just like, follow, subscribe. I appreciate it. Follow me on Kick. Follow me on Twitch. And obviously, follow me on YouTube, Big J Reacts. There'll be a lot more of these videos. Relatively new to that space. So your support is very, very welcome and appreciated. Thank you so much. Until next time. Let's take it out with some funk.